All right, welcome back, everybody. Today we're going to be looking at the behavioural management theory. Last K-niche production lecture, we looked at classical scientific management. This one here is pretty much the polar opposite. So behavioural management, we'll go into in a lot more depth, and you'll see how it's more related to people rather than structure. Now, scientific principles. So what we looked at last time, they did not always lead to increased productivity. Okay, the nature of it was repetitive. It was quite boring. People were not motivated day in and day out to go into their jobs because it was exactly the same every day, and they had no autonomy. So approximately 50 years after the emergence of the classical scientific theory, behavioural, or otherwise known as human relations, approaches surfaced. Okay, people started to realise the importance of the human and their motivations when it came to work. The behavioural school recognised that to make substantial productivity gains, worker participation in the production process was required. Now, the behavioural school recognised that, it pretty much stresses that people, so the employees, should be the main focus of the way the business is organised. So as you can see here, you've got a happy workplace with a manager or another team member, okay, talking hopefully about maybe a strategic goal or something like that, okay, and ultimately you hope they go like this.
You got it.
Yeah, you got it. All right. So one thing was, workplaces are social environments, and employees are motivated by much more than self-interest. So it's not always tangible things that employees are interested in. It comes down to a lot deeper human needs. One major contributor to the behavioural management theory was Elton Mayo, as you can see in the picture just here. He's considered the founder of industrial psychology. His expertise in the field was quite substantial. Now, through his revolutionary experiments, which we'll go into, conducted at a company in Chicago, he discovered what became known as the Hawthorne effect. It demonstrated meeting people's social needs and the fact that this had a large effect on productivity. Worker satisfaction, to a large extent, he found, is non-economic, i.e. workers have social needs. We are naturally social beings, and we need these things to remain motivated. He found that being made to feel part of a team increased job satisfaction and productivity. Okay, now this flew in the face of the scientific theory, whereby it wasn't essentially a part of a team. You were quite, you were given a job, a specific job, and that was yours to complete, and you had no real input into what happened. So with this Hawthorne effect, what happened was Mayo found out, he wanted to find out what effect, especially fatigue and monotony, so the same thing over and over again, had on employee productivity. He selected 6 female staff members at this company in Chicago, from an assembly line. So what we looked at in that last lesson, just like in Henry Ford's production line, where you've just got the same job to do over and over, he separated them from the rest of the factory and placed them under control of a supportive supervisor. So somebody who was doing something a little bit different than what was thought was the supervisor's role at that time. Now, the team was involved in assembling telephone relays, so it's quite old school. This is when telephones were all obviously linked via cable. He continued to make frequent changes to their work environment, and always discussed and explained the changes in advance to these staff members. So he let them know what was going on the whole time, so they're always aware. To his amazement, he actually realised that productivity had increased significantly with these changes. The 6 individual employees started to become part of a team, and together they eagerly participated in what their job was. Okay, they were happy knowing they were working without coercion from senior managers or limitations from workplace structure. So they were given what their job was or what their overall goal was, and they weren't micromanaged per se. They felt they were working under less pressure. They weren't being pushed or bossed around by anyone. And Hawthorne found that under these conditions, they developed an increased sense of responsibility, and especially to the business, with discipline coming from within the team. So this very much flew in the face of what the scientific and what the current theories at the time were for effective management. Now, the characteristics of behavioural management, and we'll look at this in more depth as we go through, but there's flat organisational structure. So there was definitely more of a hierarchy when it comes to scientific classical management. There's a wider span of control, okay? So it's not narrowed to just specific managers. There's a wider span of control. There's improved communication. People have to multi-skills, so they're actually asked for more of an input than just, say, one specific thing. And it really matched with democratic leadership style, which once again we'll look at in more detail. Now, in terms of flat organisational structure, where you look at it here, you can see that there's still a manager at the top, okay? This is where it's the same as the classical scientific theory. There's still a manager at the top, but it's the role of that manager that changes, okay? There was a delayering of traditional management structure, okay? So there was a removal of middle management and supervisory roles. So the chain of command was a lot more, I guess the chain of communication actually was a lot more, a lot easier, okay? There was establishment of market-focused work cells with a concentration on one product, process, or customer. So once again, there was the continuous emphasis on teams and teams coming towards actually completing some kind of business goal. And then each work cell was responsible for a wide range of production functions, which encouraged multi-skilling, quality control, and maintenance. There was more team ownership. The people actually had ownership in what they were doing at work every day. And this had dramatic effects on productivity. Now, teams. Teams are the integral and most important part of behavioural management, okay? And it's about, I guess, creating a team culture that is continuously working, managing itself, and achieving the goals of the business. It involves people who interact regularly and coordinate their work towards common goals. So it's about finding out who's got the specific skills needed and really building upon those person's strengths. Okay, so you're working together to try and find the right way to go about things. And for the manager, this meant that they weren't necessarily making massive decisions. They were more about understanding a group dynamic and how to get the most out of their team. Okay, so they had to ensure cohesion and a sense of belonging to the organisation. You'll see some advantages of teams below, including there was increased accuracy and fewer mistakes because there was more people in the decision-making process. More ideas are stimulated. So, I've had it before where sometimes I just won't even think of a possibility and someone else, because of the way their brain works and how they problem solve, came up with an entirely different alternative, and it can really open your mind up to different possibilities. They're more adaptive and flexible to change because you've got support structure within there, and there's generally more enthusiasm and commitment to decisions because they are helping to make them. It's not coming specifically from the manager. Now, a participative manager or democratic leader, whatever you would like to call it, is one who asks their employees for suggestions. There's always a continual feedback cycle. They then seriously consider those suggestions. It's not just for show. When making the decision, they really take this into account. In a sense, they share the decision-making authority with their team, with their subordinates. The degree of sharing can range from manager outlining a solution with the possibility of changes being suggested to allowing the team to participate in the initial decision making. So it can be different. Participative styles are likely to be used by managers with the behavioural style. It very much flows into each other. Consultation occurs. They recognise strengths, abilities, and experience of employees. It's very much about knowing your team. Okay, this style is frequently practiced by those businesses with flatter organizational structure, especially effective in situations where there are diverse groups to be coordinated. The contribution of employees is valued. That's one of the main things. They insist in the decision-making process through regular meetings and, as I said, continual feedback. And employees have a commitment to the business goals because they are part of this decision-making process, and they're always allowed input into what's happening in that business. Now, there's a few examples of democratic leadership and behavioural management. Now, Google, Google as one of the foremost companies in the world, are very much about employee feedback. Okay, they allow a lot of autonomy. A lot of problem solving is based on allowing the employee to have autonomy and really come to, I guess, their own decisions and self-management. Now, you'll see from these photos below here, they're actually from the Google offices around the world. Google is known for having extravagant office places that have chill-out areas, free lunch, free gym, free back massages, whatever it might be. They're really known for their treatment of employees. Now, the New York Times reported on a project which Google actually undertook for their own management. It was called Project Oxygen. Now, the aim of the project by Google was to find out what the best managers at Google, do to have teams that perform better, that are happier, and they wanted to analyze the data to see if it was something that managers could do in order to actually, help their team. So the project team gathered more than 10,000 observations about managers across more than 100 variables from various performance reviews, feedback surveys, and other reports. They then looked for, patterns within this, systematically interviewing managers to test their hypothesis as well. Now, they analysed the data and drew conclusions, which we'll look at in a second, and the results were summarised as Google rules, which consisted of a set of 8 good behaviours, which were then operationalised in behavioural terms, and they produced that into the 3 pitfalls of managers as well. So I'll just get this website up, so I'll be back in a second. All right, so as you see here, these are the Google rules. They're created to engineer better managers, and you'll see the 8 good behaviours that they came up with here, and they're very much along the behavioural lines. So they need to be a good coach, and there's some of these here, especially being specific and having constructive feedback, empowering your team, so do not micromanage. So, having autonomy within there. Express interest in team members' success and personal well-being. So, one way that I even work as a teacher is to really try and take an interest in my students and ask them questions and get interested in what they do outside of school. And I, in turn, try to actually give back so that it's creating this two-way street, I guess. So it's not just me asking all these things. Don't be a sissy. So be productive and results orientated. What it's saying there is almost be bold to do something different, Do not just follow, Be a good communicator and listen. It's always about listening to that feedback. Be productive and help employees with career development. So don't, just because you might have a good employee, you don't do everything to try and keep them in your team. You're interested in actually advancing them. Have a clear vision and strategy for the team, and that obviously goes in line with Google's goals and strategies as well. Have key technical skills so you can advise the team, so making sure that your own skills and knowledge are up to scratch so that you can really give back to them and help out in times of trouble. There's the 3 pitfalls then as well. So have trouble making a transition to the team, lack a consistent approach, and spend too little time managing and communicating. It's almost the key thing is that they're saying, if you don't have an interest in your team, they will never work with you in order to achieve your objectives. So anyway, I hope we actually have liked this lecture, and I'll see you next time for the next K-Niche production, West Side.